Coming up on a newscast, North Korea launches its first ICBM in more than 4 years, dramatically escalating tensions as Western leaders gather in Brussels for a security summit. Russia's attack on Ukraine has been ongoing for a month now. World leaders meet for an extraordinary NATO summit to address the situation. Funeral homes in South Korea struggle to keep up with a sudden surge in deaths, with the nation reporting record-high COVID-19 related deaths. Advanced bookings begin for vaccine rollouts for 5 to 11-year-olds. Hello and welcome to our newscast. I'm Daniel Che here to bring the latest. Let's begin with our top story. North Korea fired an ICBM. It's a type the regime hasn't tested at full range or capability since November 2017. Seoul responded with live fire drills to display ability to precisely strike the regime's missile launch points. Bae Eun-ji starts us off.
North Korea on Thursday fired an intercontinental ballistic missile toward the East Sea. Although it was launched at a steep angle, it is the first full capability launch of an ICBM in more than 4 years. South Korea's Joint Chiefs of Staff said the missile fired at around 2:30 p.m. from the Sunan airfield in Pyongyang traveled around 1,080 kilometers at an altitude of 6,200 kilometers. According to Japan's Coast Guard, it landed inside Japan's exclusive economic zone, 170 kilometers west of Aomori Prefecture, in the north of the country. Speaking to reporters on Thursday, a South Korean military official said the missile flew for more than an hour. There has been speculation that the launch may have involved the North's new ICBM Hwasong-17 that the regime appears to have been testing recently. But the official said there is a possibility that it could have been a different ICBM, and that research is still being carried out in cooperation with the U.S. In response to North Korea's provocation, the South Korean military fired missiles from ground, sea, and air toward the East Sea at 4:25 p.m., around 2 hours after the North launched its missile. It involved one surface-to-surface missile and one Army Tactical Missile System missile. The military also shot a Haesong-2 ship-to-ground missile and 2 JDAM, Joint Direct Attack Munition air-to-surface missiles.
We confirmed that we have the capability to precisely target the location of the launch as well as its command and support facilities whenever the North fires missiles.
The chairman of Joint Chiefs of Staff, General Won In-cheol, held a virtual meeting with Commander of U.S. Forces Korea, General Paul LaCamera, where they reaffirmed to maintain strong defense posture. Also, shortly after today's launch, the Blue House convened an emergency National Security Council meeting, where President Moon Jae-in strongly condemned the launch, saying that it's a clear violation of UN Security Council resolutions. Regarding the country's defense posture, he also ordered officials to closely cooperate with those working with President-elect Yoon Suk-yeol. Moon also called for an immediate halt in acts that raise tensions and urged the regime to return to talks. Bae Eun-ji, Arirang News.
South Korea's chief nuke envoy strongly condemned the regime's ICBM launch along with his American and Japanese counterparts. It remains to be seen whether the international community will move to impose additional sanctions on Pyongyang. Yoon Jung-min reports.
Seoul's chief nuclear envoy Do Gyu-duk and his U.S. counterpart Sung Kim both strongly condemned North Korea's most recent ICBM test. They spoke on the phone on Thursday and agreed that North Korea has broken its own moratorium, saying that it's a clear violation of multiple UN Security Council resolutions. They also called the launch a serious threat not just to the Korean peninsula, but to the entire international community. Do and Kim agreed on the need for a stern response and also urged for the North to immediately stop raising tensions. The nuclear chiefs also agreed to bolster the allies' close coordination. Separately, Do also spoke on the phone with his Japanese counterpart Takehito Funakoshi, and they too condemned the missile test. In a White House statement, the U.S. strongly condemned the regime's missile launch, adding that President Biden and his national security team are assessing the situation in close coordination with its allies. While calling the launch a brazen violation of UN resolutions, Washington said the door has not closed on diplomacy. Japanese Prime Minister Fumio Kishida called North Korea's latest missile launch an unacceptable act of violence. China has called for what it termed a political resolution to the launch. The U.S. is likely to request an emergency UN Security Council meeting, and it remains to be seen whether it can garner support from Russia and China. Currently, the UNSC restricts the sale or transfer of all refined petroleum products to North Korea with the allowed maximum aggregate of up to 500,000 barrels a year and limits crude oil supply to 4 million barrels. It could further tighten those restrictions following the ICBM test, but that'd require at least 9 votes out of the 15 UNSC members. Also, there shouldn't be a veto by any of the 5 permanent members, which include Russia and China. It remains to be seen because there's been tensions between the U.S. and the West versus Russia and China over a number of geopolitical issues, including the war in Ukraine. Yoon Jung-min, Arirang News.
President-elect Yoon Suk-yeol's transition committee reacted to the missile launch. The team called for stronger cooperation with the U.S. to respond to the hostile action and urged the UNSC to call up an emergency meeting. Kim Do-yeon has the details.
The Presidential Transition Committee was quick to condemn North Korea's ICBM launch on Thursday, calling it a clear violation of the self-imposed moratorium from 2018. It urged the current administration to come up with measures to keep South Korea safe. It also said that the country has to work closely with the U.S. to respond to the threats and urged the UN Security Council to call for an emergency meeting to condemn the North's hostile action. In the meantime, President-elect Yoon Suk-yeol voiced his disapproval of the current administration on his way to work earlier in the day, making reference to recent presidential appointment that has been made.
원칙적으로 차기 정부와 단연간 일해야 될 사람을 마지막에 인사 조치하는 거는 그거는 저는 바람직하지 않다고 생각합니다.
Yoon didn't say who exactly his comments were made in reference to, but they came just a day after the current administration appointed a new chief for the Bank of Korea, a position that lasts for 4 years and is closely tied to the nation's monetary policies. The Blue House has said that the appointment was consulted with the president-elect, but Yoon's aides have denied that this is the case. There are still more appointments that President Moon Jae-in could make just before he leaves office, including 2 seats at the nation's top audit board, as well as the chief of the election committee. After meeting with the reporters, President-elect Yoon carried on with his day's schedule and addressed the members of the Balanced Regional Development Special Committee. He said a new motto for his new administration would be the era of the non-capital regions, stressing the importance of growth across the nation outside of Seoul and its surrounding areas by granting more autonomous power.
결국은 이게 지방이 균형 발전을 해서 수도권으로 모두 여기에 몰려서 여기서 목숨 걸고 경쟁하는 이런 구조가 바뀌지 않으면 이 저출산 문제가 풀릴 수가 없다라고 하는 것이 전문가들의 견해입니다.
He added that this committee is not just for the transition, but will carry on into his presidency. That said, he asked the members to focus their preparation work not only on policy directions for the new government, but also on longer-term goals. Kim Do-yeon, Arirang News.
The Transition Committee will push ahead with the President-elect's judicial reform and remove the Justice Minister's authority to direct investigations to help the prosecution maintain political neutrality. The prosecution itself widely supports the plan, but the current Justice Ministry does not. Lee Kyung-eun tells us more.
President-elect Yoon Suk-yeol's Transition Committee is hearing policy briefings from major ministries. But on Thursday, the hearing from the Justice Ministry was postponed at the last minute as Justice Minister Park Bum-gye just the day before objected to Yoon's campaign promises for judicial reform.
It is rude and incomprehensible that an outgoing minister opposes the pledges of a president-elect chosen by the people.
Justice Minister Park had objected to Yoon's plans to remove the Justice Minister's authority to direct investigations and empower the prosecution to draw up its own budget instead of the Justice Ministry. Park cited the need of transparency, but the committee emphasized neutrality.
The reform plan reflects the president-elect's will to restore public trust in the prosecution and strengthen the independence and political neutrality of the prosecution.
Later in the afternoon, the committee announced it has had a separate policy briefing from the Supreme Prosecutor's Office, which largely agreed with Yoon's plan. To that, the committee said it will push ahead with the reform plan through a direct order by the new Justice Minister to come. Meanwhile, the committee has appointed Professor Shim Kyo-eun to head its task force on real estate. Shim has been largely critical of the current government's public sector-driven housing policies.
The team will lay out the agenda related on the urgent task of stabilizing the housing market and their plan to prevent any side effects in the market.
Members of the planning committee have also been finalized. In the body unique to Yoon's transition team, they'll be making sure his election pledges are carried out. 1/3 of the members are young adults, an age group Yoon targeted during his campaign. Young-eun, Arirang News.
After seeing the second highest daily COVID-19 tally on Wednesday, the figures inched down slightly on Thursday, but we've seen the highest number of deaths yet, reaching nearly 500. Shin Yeon brings the updates.
South Korea on Thursday reported 395,598 new COVID-19 infections. Though this was a drop of more than 225,000 from the same time last week, the country still takes up a big portion of all the world's COVID-19 cases. In fact, the WHO said South Korea has recorded the highest number of new COVID infections in the world for 3 weeks straight. Also, the country on Thursday saw its highest number of deaths in 24 hours. 470 people died on Thursday, raising the total death toll to 13,902. But experts believe this number could soon double as the deaths occurring now come from cases reported a few weeks ago. Amid the uptick in COVID-19 figures, medical staff are saying that they have been pushed to the limit. While authorities have said the current medical capacity is under control, with 30 to 40% of hospital beds still available, many in the field have said that the government's method of evaluating the country's medical capacity shouldn't be based on the number of hospital beds available for COVID-19 patients. This is because authorities have decided to transfer critically ill COVID-19 patients to regular hospital wards after a week has passed. That's why medical staff are saying that the number of patients they're actually required to look after is much higher than the official figures.
We're trying to prevent the situation from worsening, but we're reaching a limit. Our emergency rooms have partially closed countless times. I don't know how we came this far with so many crises.
To relieve the burden on hospitals who are providing monitoring and phone counseling services to some home recovery patients, authorities have decided to narrow the criteria for who's eligible for these services. The country has some 270,000 patients in this group who are seen as high risk and receive 2 daily health checks from medical staff. They're seniors aged 60 and up and the immunocompromised. From Friday, they will need a positive PCR test result rather than a result from a rapid antigen test to be eligible for an automatic placement in the high-risk group. But even if they aren't in this group, they can call their nearby hospitals and ask for a drug prescription if needed. Meanwhile, vaccination reservations for children aged 5 to 11 kicked off on Thursday, and actual inoculations are set to start on the 31st of March. Shin Yeon, Arirang News.
It's been exactly a month since Moscow launched a full-scale attack on Ukraine. Russian forces are continuing their onslaught but face fierce resistance. World leaders are in Brussels for an extraordinary NATO summit on the situation. Song Yu-jin has the latest.
Exactly 1 month into Russia's invasion of Ukraine, and the sound of air raid sirens and shelling continues to shake the country. To deter further attacks, world leaders gathered in Brussels on Thursday for an emergency NATO summit. The closed-door meeting is set to discuss countermeasures should Russia deploy chemical, biological, or even nuclear weapons, as well as additional military assistance to Ukraine. A European Council and G7 meeting will also take place on the same day. According to the White House, U.S. President Joe Biden will introduce new sanctions on Russian political figures and oligarchs during the summits. Over in the war-torn country, the capital Kyiv was under constant shelling and gunfire on Wednesday as Russian forces try to close in on the city. According to the city's mayor, at least 264 civilians have lost their lives since the outbreak of the war. The besieged southern port city of Mariupol has sustained weeks of heavy bombardment and now fighting in the streets, with at least 100,000 people trapped inside without food, water, or power. In the northern city of Chernihiv, its regional governor says Moscow has dropped bombs and destroyed a bridge used to deliver aid and evacuate civilians. However, although Ukrainians are surrounded, they are not defeated. A senior U.S. defense official told CNN on Wednesday local time that Ukrainian forces have pushed Russian forces back on the front lines east of Kyiv. The latest assessment from the UK's defense ministry says Ukrainian forces are, quote, increasing pressure on Russian troops northeast of the capital while successfully conducting counterattacks.
This near to Brovary, it's open information. From the west of Ukraine, from the north, in behind the Lutish, and there is big battle. And from official sources, we receive information. Right now, the small city Makariv and almost whole Irpin already in the control is Ukrainian soldier.
With Ukrainians showing fierce resistance, President Zelensky is now calling the world to show solidarity.
Come from your offices, your homes, your schools and universities. Come in the name of peace. Come with Ukrainian symbols to support Ukraine, to support freedom, to support life. Come to your squares, your streets. Make yourselves visible and heard. Say that people matter, freedom matters, peace matters, Ukraine matters. From March 24th, in downtowns of your cities, all as one together who want to stop the war.
송유진, Arirang News.
Back here in the nation, President Moon's nominee to head the Bank of Korea spoke up about the possible directions for the future. Lee Chang-yong, currently an IMF official, vowed to give detailed consideration to Korea's economic growth, price pressures, and financial imbalances. Ji-young shares with us his remarks.
South Korea's economic growth will be reviewed thoroughly by the Bank of Korea's incoming governor when devising monetary policies. In his first public remarks on Thursday, Lee Chang-yong said he'll carry out monetary policy in a balanced manner by taking into consideration economic growth, inflationary pressure, and financial stability. But he mentioned that the U.S. Federal Reserve accelerating the normalization of its monetary policy and possible slowdown of the Chinese economy due to the spread of the Omicron variant in China will have an impact. He also said it is difficult to assess the effect of the war in Ukraine on domestic and global economies, as it is hard to predict how it'll unfold. With growing economic uncertainty and soaring inflation both at home and abroad, he said worries are mounting and those factors should be considered when deciding on monetary policies. He was nominated as new central bank chief on Wednesday by President Moon Jae-in. He is currently the director of the Asia and Pacific Department at the International Monetary Fund and is to replace Lee Ju-yeol, who will leave office next Thursday. He said he appreciates Lee Ju-yeol's efforts to normalize monetary policy during his 8 years in charge of the country's central bank, particularly during the last 2 years of the pandemic. Lee Chang-yong added that with his experience working at the IMF for the last 8 years, he'll do his utmost to resolve economic difficulties with the Monetary Policy Committee. Should he pass a confirmation hearing at the National Assembly, Lee will serve at least one 4-year term. Ji-young, Arirang News.
South Korea's low birth rate led the country's population to its first ever decline. In 2021, the total fertility rate fell to a new low for the 5th straight year. An annual report on Korean society also showed more people felt lonely during the pandemic. Kim Jung-min has the full story.
South Korea for the first time saw its total population actually decline last year. This is according to an annual report on society from Statistics Korea. The report for 2021 released on Thursday shows that South Korea's population was 51.75 million. This is a fall of 90,000 from the peak a year before. And because of the country's low birth rate, the population is expected to keep shrinking for the foreseeable future, falling as low as 50 million by 2040. The total fertility rate dropped to a new record low for a fifth straight year at 0.81 births per woman. That figure is the lowest in the OECD, well below the average of 1.61 in 2019. This came as the number of marriages also dropped to an all-time low of 193,000 last year. And with more people choosing to live alone or not have babies, family size in South Korea shrunk to an average of just 2.3 members. That was down almost 0.8 members from a decade ago. Adding to that, the pandemic has only weakened social connection. Only 2 in 10 people said they had someone who they can talk to when feeling depressed, down from 6 in 10 people in 2019. And the depression was apparently felt more by people who are less well off. On a positive note, South Korea's job market continued to recover, with the employment rate rising to 60.5%, up 0.4 percentage points on year. Also, the number of crimes reported per 100,000 people dropped to just over 3,300, a decline of more than 14% from a decade ago. 김성민, Arirang News.
China's media regulator allowed several Korean dramas to be shown on streaming platforms. Many are curious as to whether this is a sign of the end of Beijing's cultural freeze. Kim Bo-kyung turned to some experts for their insights on the matter.
Familiar dramas with Chinese titles. Beijing has unofficially banned Korean cultural content from being consumed in China since 2017, as part of its economic retaliation against Korea's introduction of the Terminal High Altitude Area Defense System from the U.S. However, starting early this March, domestic broadcaster JTBC's drama Something in the Rain began to be streamed through one of the major Chinese over-the-top services, iQIYI, while TVN's Prison Playbook, Another Miss O, and Queen In-hyun's Men have re-entered the Chinese version of YouTube known as Bilibili. Though not the latest releases, these dramas are regaining popularity among Chinese viewers, getting millions of views. South Korean drama's unique storytelling has been pointed to as the element that caught the eyes of Chinese millennials and Gen Z.
Chinese content is usually historical or political. Compared to that, Korean content has quite a lot of freedom and variation, and its storylines are delicate and emotionally sensitive, which might be the reason behind its popularity.
Korean dramas being shown on Chinese streaming platforms is significant, as it means the drama was approved by the Chinese media regulator. Experts, however, say this is far from the end of the years-long cultural freeze.
Screenings of the latest content on public broadcasters and cable TV is still tough. And to say the ban has been lifted, publications, movies, and variety TV programs should be able to be released.
He adds that there might have been a political intention behind such action, China trying to use it as leverage before starting off a new relationship with the incoming government in South Korea.
China needs to redefine its diplomatic status with South Korea. By approving several dramas as a way of setting examples, China would have wanted to see how the new government reacts to it.
China's internal politics, too, could determine whether such favorable moves continue, with President Xi looking to strengthen his position at the Communist Party National Congress set for this year.
When it comes to propaganda, media is very important. Because Xi getting ready for his third term, restrictions on foreign content might be strengthened to spread patriotism.
But Korea's content industry is hoping China makes more moves to allow Korean cultural content. Kim Bo-kyung, Arirang News.
Soaking rain is forecast to arrive tomorrow night. Showers will begin starting from the west of the country. They will gradually spread nationwide, and the further south you are, the more rain you'll be receiving. For mountainous regions of Jeju Island, up to 250 millimeters are in the forecast. The Seoul metropolitan area, Jeollado province, will see about 20 to 70 millimeters. Although most of the rain will wash away the fine dust, some regions will see poor air quality. Dust concentrations will stay high across Gangwon-do and Chungcheong-do provinces. Also, keep in mind that violent winds are in the forecast for coastal areas. Winds will be gusting up to 10 to 18 meters per second, so please secure any items that can get blown away. Morning lows will range from 4 to 10 degrees nationwide. Seoul will start up at 7 degrees Celsius. As for the daily highs, Seoul and Gwangju will get up to 19 degrees. Gyeongju will be warm at 22 degrees. Showers will continue into Saturday morning, and after the rain, temperatures will cool down for a while. That's all for now, and here are the weather conditions around the world.
And that's all from us. As always, thank you for watching.